Historic day.
Why is it a historic day?
Tom Chatter coming off a one-game suspension. Alice Shittick. So Saturday, my brother stayed over Friday night. And then Saturday, as he's leaving, two other friends happened to be in the neighborhood and popped in. Because these are guys, this is my core crew from the 1990s. Of just these two guys. Mm-hmm. And so we decided to have some fun on Saturday, early afternoon.
Well, you had fun Friday night.
Friday night, yeah, but that was contained fun.
Right, but then you had fun Friday morning.
Right, Friday or midday, anyway.
Well, your friend was arriving at 11 a.m. when I got home with our son from basketball.
Is that true? Someone arrived? Okay, so that turned into...
And you were already, by 1:30 p.m., not available to drive our son to a play date.
Was that all Saturday?
That was Saturday at
Yes.
1:30 p.m. You
So
were not capable of driving him to a play date.
Alice, I don't have a license, among other things. So my normal DUI would be one thing, but now I have no license. So here's the thing. So I had the right combination of friends come over on a Saturday, and then it was Sunday night at 7, and Alice was yelling at me. She actually 25th Amendmented me off of my own show. So, I
had an interview that I had booked like a month before that I had cleared with you. We had talked about doing it. We were both excited about. I thought we were both excited about it. I was, you had made a push that we needed to book more guests, and I went out and
we love her.
Guests,
yes,
and we love her, and she's great. And I listened to her podcast, and so I was embarrassed by your weekend of behavior and by your personal presentation by Sunday evening.
Yes.
And I did not let you do the interview with me because I was ashamed of you.
25th Amendment. So I had to sit it out. I actually did come back in at the end of the interview and ask Faith a couple of questions. Alice has cut that. They will not.
I didn't. That was not a part of what I recorded.
My signs are not on that whatsoever. It was because I was pressured and cajoled by these two fellows. It wiped out the weekend. I was in trouble. I was in the doghouse all weekend. I still I'm on little probation.
Well, like Sunday around midday, as I was getting home from church with all the kids, where I took them by myself after going to our daughter's play twice and getting people to practice and picking them up from friends' houses and everything else, I said, I think it's totally great and wonderful and lovely that you're having a fun weekend with your friends. If you're not going to be able to do this interview, I'd like to let her know sooner rather than later that we need to reschedule. And you said, no, I'm going to be totally fine to do the interview. I'm going to sober right up. You're going to be the best interview you've ever seen, lady. And then when a tousle-haired, red-rimmed eyed, scary person dragged himself out of his bed off his CPAP machine. Where's the interview? I was like, no, just go. I'll just handle the interview. Thank you.
So there was all sorts of stuff. It ended as messy as it possibly could. And even the
interview went great though, I thought.
Thankfully, everybody who was involved is alive because some of them don't live all that close to here. And yes, I guess the interview. We'll hear it today because we're going to play it at some point. Alice has to leave.
Mm-hmm. I have to run out and pick up kids, so Tom's going to use that time to play the interview. Mm-hmm.
So yes, I am on probation here as we head to 1 week from today, Alice.
Oh, and we didn't even get to the pinching incident.
Oh, yeah.
That's the reason Tom's in
I'm in a new phase here where I'm pinching Alice a lot.
Like literally pinching me hard so it hurts.
Yeah.
And so last night, before I went to bed, I said, like, to you in your state, like, just a reminder, I have work in the morning, and I'm very tired because this has been a long weekend, and I'm very exhausted, and I really need my sleep. So if you could not, as you sometimes do when you come up to bed because you were downstairs watching KMS or whatever, I was like, I have to get to bed. If you, when you come into bed, could not wake me up, that would be really great because I really need my sleep.
Yes.
So what did you do when you came in at midnight and I was sound asleep in the bed?
Well, I mean, you are there. You're a blonde lady. I mean, I said hello. I talked to you.
You pinched me.
Yes.
Hard, so I woke up.
I didn't know. I'm getting into pinching now. These tiny little fat rolls are like very pinchable. And so that's
I woke up. I was like, "How did you just pinch me?"
Yeah.
And then you like gaslit me. You were like, "No, I didn't pinch you."
Well, I mean, I was not of sound mind at that time. It was, I can't be held responsible for the state I was in last night. I mean, come on, that was ridiculous. And it was not my own fault. That's what these dudes from the '90s came back and were hanging out last night and yesterday and 2 days ago, and I have defriended them out of my life.
I don't need you to defriend them. I just maybe you should go to their houses next time for this. So that you're not like, at least my like boss's boss says to lead, follow, or get out of the way. And this weekend you were not leading, you were not following, and so if you could just next time you feel like doing that, and I encourage you to let loose and have fun sometimes, but maybe you should do it somewhere where you're not like actively disrupting me.
See, the thing is about that, Alice, is that a lot of times in the heat of pitch battle, the strategy goes away. And so, yes, the best laid plans of mice and men is what I say, Alice. Steinbeck, by the way. So, yeah, in the heat of pitch battle, all the plans went awry. So, but that's fine. I saw some old friends. We had a good time. One of the guys actually has had a date set up last night with a woman we met at a bar, and he was unable to show up because he was also cajoled by me. But there you go. So I'm sorry I pinched you. I'm sorry I pinched you. You never know with you, so...
Well, sometimes when I say specifically, don't wake me up while I'm sleeping because I really need my sleep tonight and I'm very tired.
Alice, in life, you miss all the shots you don't take. So Wayne Gretzky. Okay. So, I want to get to a couple things that are in the
there was, like, news yesterday, too, that we could have done had we done a show yesterday.
There?
I mean, well, not yesterday in particular, but there were things we hadn't gotten to yet for the weekend that we hadn't covered.
Okay, a couple of things have happened. One, have you seen this thing with the Eagles fan and the woman is... A Packers fan is going and they're sitting in seats, and this Eagles fan, of course, the Philly fans are the worst. So he's an a-hole to her, calls her the C word. He says, "You're an ugly bleeping C word" to her. He's like, the guy is blitzed, obviously. He feels empowered because they're surrounded by Eagles fans. So if somebody gets in a fight, then he's going to obviously have bros in there with him. And anyway, this guy like calls her the C word. It's like he's a miserable, like, dark POS. This guy's just he's not like me over the weekend, gregarious, fun, drunk. This guy is just like dark and like he kind of terrorized their game watching experience by being so like vicious. And the internet, of course, has caught this, and now they've found the guy who did it and put his name out there. They've put his name out there, and they've like a bunch of people on the internet have said like, would you want to say calling your wife that with a picture of his wife, or daughter with a picture of his daughter? Her face has been obscured, whatever. So, and I was thinking about like this thing where we make the person famous on the internet when the person's had a bad or just did something terrible. And I find it edifying. I'm happy that the mob went after this guy. He's some kind of manager and some kind of thing. And, he's an a-hole. And I'm sorry. I think that the world was made better when people went after the Chick-fil-A bullying. Or with this guy who was like vicious, maybe if you're a tough guy and you're, disparaging this woman who's got kids, I think, and calling her an ugly word, maybe like such misogyny and abuse, which the only thing that could have stopped it or changed it is if her husband got in the guy's face. But then again, it would have been the husband bleeding badly, and so they had to let it go. I'm sorry, I have no problem with this guy being destroyed by the internet. No problem. There are consequences. Like, you get to feel tough and cool that you got to call this little diminutive woman their name, and now it gets visited upon you. And it's good. And Philly fans are a-holes. Not that the Boston fans and New York fans aren't as well. But yeah, like maybe we should have a society where a bunch of men care that you're bullying a woman, saying ugly things about a woman.
Yeah, I think that's probably true.
And you should be corrected. And so, like, I'm seeing this, and the guy's obviously his life's going to be
But what
over.
about, okay, so, I mean, in this case, yes. But what about, like, sometimes the mob is wrong, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So, and
Yes.
I bring this up because there was this interesting news story. And, I mean, like, I think you and I mostly like these things where people do these sort of homemade to catch a predator things.
Yes. I know what you're talking about.
Where basically, like, random vigilantes will like message people on the internet and say they're going to meet them and they're 15 and whatever to like catch some guy, and then they videotape it and put it on the internet, and like then people have their lives ruined because they were going to hook up with a 15-year-old, which makes sense, and like you should have your life ruined if you're going to hook up with a 15-year-old. But unfortunately this has empowered people to go further into stuff that's like not illegal or that's much more in a gray area. So for example, this is from NBC News this week. Mob of college students attack a man in TikTok-inspired trap, police say. So there's this like TikTok trend of doing these to catch a predator things.
Yes, yep.
These DIY to catch a predators where they go on Tinder, they set up a profile, they try and entrap somebody, and then, you know, turn on them when they show up to meet somebody.
Right, and the payoff in the high is humiliating him on camera.
Right.
And, you know, we've done something good here because the guy's obviously a pedophile, and so we've busted him and humiliated him. Yes, it's something that everybody can get behind.
But in this case, 6 college students in Massachusetts were accused of luring an active duty service member whom they falsely described as a sexual predator to their campus, where a group of more than 24 people chased and assaulted him, authorities said. One of the students who was charged told police the plot was modeled on the To Catch a Predator NBC program aimed to catch adults seeking to prey on minors. So anyway, it turns out that they entrapped him by saying he was going to meet an 18-year-old girl.
Right,
He's 22.
Right.
And he's an active duty service member. And
which may seem on the young side, but it is not illegal. And according to the eyes of the law, it is according to the law, it is legal. And if it's consensual, it is good to go.
Right. So, and they actually reported it to the university officials first. They said that a creepy Tinder app contact had come to campus looking to meet a 17-year-old girl. And they told this to the university and tried to get him in more trouble, went to the campus police. And this young lady said she'd been the victim of unsolicited contact and her friends chased the guy away. But they went through the messages and everybody said that this guy was home for a funeral.
Right.
And you know, she invited her to meet him and said she was 18, and then they created a mob saying that he was trying to hook up with a 17-year-old girl and was a predator and all this stuff, and so it became Attack the Sexual Predator.
Right.
So mob justice feels good a lot of times, but like sometimes people are just like wrong. I mean, and
well, and also, I'm sorry, if you find it distasteful, if this guy was 34 and she's 18, it's still legal. And because like these bros decided, no, you can't take somebody from our age group from us or whatever, it's still legal. I'm sorry.
Well, right, but there's a bunch of people, and increasingly people are putting age gap relationships in a category of predatory that they've never been seen as in all of human history, and certainly not like in our lifetime. So you and I have a 14-year age gap, which is pretty large, but I saw
which is
one
awesome
today,
if you're me and terrible if you're you.
In the comments to this article on Twitter, I saw some people arguing, and one person said like, well, I'm 30 and my boyfriend's 8 years older than me. And a bunch of people are replying saying, that's so wrong. What could a 30-year-old and a 38-year-old have in common to talk about? Which, like, are you 15? Why do you think a 30-year-old and a 38-year-old wouldn't have anything in common to talk about? That's like the same age to me.
Well, that is definitely the same. That is not even, the whole thing is very funny, and it's something that we never think about. And really, even in the first few weeks after that, you never think, oh, yeah, that's right, we are. Oh, yeah, that's right, you know, or something.
Totally predatory.
Yeah, and it's like, I don't get it. I understand from the outside, it seems like it's unfair in the dude's getting a good. Oh, she's got to be damaged. He's getting a really good deal, and I know that something's up there. Sometimes people just get along,
and just like each other,
right? And the age is just not a thing. Sometimes, I understand. I get it from having been a young guy, and it seems as a young man too. When I was just 20 years old and I was dating a 23-year-old, I was like, oh no, actually at one point I was 21 and there was a 26-year-old, and I was like, I was like, she's like, Tom, I want to talk about like the emotional journey we're taking. And I remember one time saying, I'm 21. You're 26. You know things. I don't know.
But I think like 22 to 18 is like one of the least dramatic ones I've ever heard of.
It is, although if you're 18 and you have not, you've been living in captivity.
College. Both people could be in college, like a freshman in college and a senior in college.
Yeah, I mean it's different. It's a different thing. First of all, I think there's also like when you're 18 years old, you're right out of the wrapper. You are like a flawless looking person at 18.
Probably true, yeah.
And like soft and young and all that stuff. I prefer older than that, believe it or not, because I think that women start to get like signs of character, etc. And like the world beats them up a little bit, and as they get older, it's like it's quite attractive. But yeah, no, it's all this. You know what it is? It's all about, and especially when guys do it, it's all about. Wait, wait, hold on. You're not allowed to be eligible for that. That should be eligible for me. I should be eligible for that. Or like some other people, but you're not allowed to be eligible for that. She's not allowed to think that that's because everybody has to. The jock has to date the hot cheerleader, and that's what we have, especially in this country in the last 50 years. That's equilibrium, and that's symmetry culturally. Yes, she's really hot. She has to go with the other hot guy. That's right. And they can be vacuous together, and that's all it has to be. And if you're like a green-haired artist kind of freak kind of person, you get to date the other person who's also, got the big black boots. What are those boots? Doc Martens, whatever. You guys, that's the pairing. That's the order of things. That's what it has to be. When people break them, people get offended. It's weird. They get upset. It's like if the 22-year-old is hooking up with an 18-year-old, it's like all the other 18 to 20-year-olds are like, hey, somebody's absconded with one of our team, and we only connect with each other, and that doesn't. Yeah. No, I saw that it went wrong, etc.
I mean, I'm glad they arrested the students, but it's like, even if they just shamed this guy, if we reach a point in our society where, like, it is considered shameful for a 22-year-old to want to hook up with an 18-year-old on Tinder, like, what, they're going to ruin his life over that?
But also, and I don't want to take from Matt Walsh, but Matt Walsh talked about this today, and he made the point where, like, these all, that's uneven because she's not done developing emotionally and intellectually, and he's further along than she is. But everybody would be fine with her taking puberty blockers at 14.
Right.
That she's okay for. We can do that,
I mean, I think we do have to, like, settle on some kind of age of majority and just stick with it. Like, whatever we decide that is.
Well, isn't that the thing, though? Is that if you're an 18-year-old woman, you're in captivity. You're operating within the family unit. You're operating within the school and the culture of school where you're not treated as an adult. And then suddenly, at 18, you're given all the agency and all the decision making and over your own life, etc. And yeah, I mean, I think.
But aren't you as a parent sort of supposed to slowly be giving your child more responsibilities and things as they grow? And letting them come into their own and gain confidence doing stuff. And like, we encounter this because we as parents let our kids do more than I think some parents do. We're like more in the free range kids camp. Like, we let our son bike miles away and like transact at the grocery store on his own. We're going to let our daughter get a job at 14. I had a parent tell me that, like, oh my gosh, my child's not ready for a job to like bag groceries and I kind of feel like by 14, like you should be capable of bagging groceries and like interacting with adult people and functioning to that level.
Yes.
And I think you're doing your kid a disservice if you're not like at least slowly transitioning them onto that path of being able to make decisions like that. Because if you then throw that kid at 18 who's never ventured out of the hothouse.
The hothouse? What's that?
Like a hothouse flower.
Oh. Wow.
A hothouse is like a greenhouse or a heated place to grow plants, and then they can't live outside if you put them out in the open.
Gotcha.
So a hothouse flower. But if you let your child out of the hothouse when they're, 18, having tried nothing. I mean, the same parents also told me our school does an 8th grade trip to DC, and they said that they didn't feel comfortable letting their kid do that either. Like, you have to slowly open the door to life. Otherwise, 18 comes along and your kid's not ready to make any decision.
Yeah.
But, like, we have to, as a society, for legal purposes, have some kind of cutoff where, people become responsible, and it has to be some kind of average. Because if we're basing it purely on emotional maturity and brain development, like, people would be ready at different ages, and how would you possibly determine that in a court of law and everything else? So we have to legally have an age that's the cutoff for being responsible for your own decisions and being able to make decisions about like adult sexuality and marriage and having kids and all sorts of things, right? Those are the, rules we have to accept as a society, is that we have to like come to some sort of agreement on what's the age and move forward from there. And then like you as a parent know in advance that that's the age, and you have to get your kid ready for that to some extent or the other. So, I mean, I don't know what the answer is. Like, I don't think that children should endure like horrible trauma to force maturity on them at way too young an age. But I also think that, sometime in the teens, you should be starting to like bring your child out into the world and show them around a little bit.
No, I think so. And that's why it's like important. And we don't do enough of it. I don't think we do. I mean, they've traveled a little bit, but good.
Like, our daughter's been on a plane alone. As an unaccompanied minor and all that stuff.
And speaking of like sports games, my dad had season tickets to the Red Sox, so we were in their rough crowd when they were getting drunk. We saw a whole bunch of fist fights. This is, as just little 11-year-old kids, etc. And we used to learn to transact on our own as well. And you would see back then the Red Sox sucked, so there was a lot of negativity going around and some very clever insults hurled at players, and etc. And that gets you going a little bit too. And even like my dad would use a scalper, and so like we use a scalper, and these guys are like dealing coke and selling Sox tickets, and like they're kind of a rough bunch of dudes. It's so like I do think like going into the big city is part of that, where you can learn to be a little bit more dusted up. But where we are now, it's like our daughter wants to go out to essentially Portsmouth, New Hampshire, which is on weeknights, sometimes with friends. And for us here, that's the big city, but it's really not the big city. But still, it's going out on weeknights with friends.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
I said no to going out on weeknights with friends in the city. I'm not doing pickup for that at 9 o'clock.
No. And that's, especially, with the podcast, et cetera, it's like, but
to be fair, she wanted to be picked up at the library. So I don't think it was like a really rousing night out on the town, but I
didn't want her to run into me.
But yeah, like there's obviously a happy medium, but I think that, we're on purpose making kids so immature and so unable to handle anything.
Yes.
And then it's like, then we're pathologizing normal relationships for people who are mature enough to have them.
Right. Yeah.
Because some 18-year-olds aren't fully cooked because they're sheltered and confused about life. Like, now nobody else is allowed to date 18-year-olds.
Right. And they're scared. Which is another thing, by the way, I do think it's good to Like I've told our daughter not to trust any boys. That boys are nefarious and have bad intentions, etc. And I'm glad that she believes that. You know, there are some things that it's good to be a little bit on edge about. Mm-hmm. You know, that you can see these are wolves out there.
Mm-hmm. But this is funny though. Listen to this comment about the 30-year-old and the 38-year-old. 8 years is a massive gap. You literally just turned 30 and he's pushing 40. That's a huge gap in life experiences and maturity. Why didn't he look for a woman his own age and he picked you? There's a clear answer. But that's how people see it, right? As like preying on innocent 30-year-olds who have no maturity and life experience.
Yeah. Yeah, I also think that people, they think that once a person's hitting 40, that, you know, that's the decline, and like a woman who's 30 is still at peak, you know, and people don't like that. They don't like. I want all the decliners to be with the decliners and all the peakers be with the peakers, and it's none of your freaking business. But they're like, that's how it needs to be.
All right.
So do you have to go?
I do have to go in a minute. I do want really quick before I go. Did you see that Gavin Newsom was on Pod Save?
No, but I've seen him
like mid-disaster. Still, he's like on with the Pod Save Bros.
I've watched a lot of him today, and he's like dancing and swaying and like smiling.
He's terrible. And then the Pod Save Bros started fundraising.
Oh, I heard that,
quote unquote, for the fires, but it's like going through their super PAC, which it's on Act Blue, and Act Blue takes a 4% processing fee out of everything. So my suggestion would be, if you want to donate for the fire relief fund, like just go directly to the charities that are like real charities. Don't donate to the Pod Save America Super PAC because they say they're going to donate to the individual charities with that money, like that. And they're just, you know, gathering email lists for future contacts for things. But incredible that they would do that on the back of the California fires while having Gavin Newsom on to talk about and he's throwing the local people under the bus while he does it. He's such a scumbag. They're such scumbags. Like, we can't get these smarmy Obama people out of American politics fast enough, as far as I'm concerned.
Totally.
I'm just like done with all of them.
And he's such a CYA POS. Do you want to intro the Faith Moore thing at all? Faith K. Moore, our friend.
Yes, you know her. She is an author, an editor, and she hosts the Storytime for Grownups podcast, where she reads old books that you might not have read or be familiar with. And she reads them aloud and explains the tricky bits so people like Tom don't get stuck on.
How dare you?
On the hard parts.
Tricky bits. How dare you?
Hi, I'm so excited to be joined today by Faith Moore. She's visited the Burn Barrel podcast before, and I'm so excited to have her because she has a new season of her podcast out. This is Storytime for Grownups, and a lot of people ask me what podcasts I listen to, I think assuming I'm going to say news, because we do a lot of news on this show, and I listen to almost no news in my day-to-day life if I'm not studying for the podcast. So among the things I like to listen to history and religion. And now I listen to Storytime for Grownups, which is a literature podcast where Faith, who has a lovely voice, reads aloud classic books and explains the pieces that are hard to understand. So without further ado, tell us a little bit about the latest book you've selected. This is the first season of your podcast that I hadn't actually read the book before, so I'm really excited.
Thanks. Well, now that I feel like you've said I have a lovely voice, I feel like I have to deliver. So I'm slightly self-conscious, but thank you for that lovely introduction. Yes, this is a much lesser known book. We started with Jane Eyre, then we did Pride and Prejudice, then for Christmas we did A Christmas Carol, but now we are reading The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins, which is the kind of prime example of a genre called the sensation novel, which we don't really have anymore, but it is the precursor to the modern thriller, like the kind of psychological thriller that, you know, you might pick up on the shelf anywhere in a bookstore or even at the airport, right? And it's
that's like all my book club reads is like new mystery, like female-centered kind of novels.
Right. So this is the precursor to that, the sort of psychological thriller or the mystery story, the detective story. Wilkie Collins is usually credited with writing the very first kind of police procedural, the first detective novel, which is a novel called The Moonstone, which he wrote later after The Woman in White. And there had been one other police procedural story by Edgar Allan Poe, which had come out before that, but that was a short story. And so in this book, you can really see Wilkie Collins working out how that idea works. Like there's been a crime committed and we're going to investigate and we're going to follow all these clues, and he's dropping clues, but we don't know they're clues. And it's a really exciting, fun book. It's a fun book, more fun, I think, than some of the other books that we've done before, but it has ties to the Gothic, which was something we talked about a great deal when we read Jane Eyre, and it has ties to a lot of the things we've read because it's another Victorian novel, and Wilkie Collins and Charles Dickens were very close friends and worked very closely together. So there's a lot of connections, but yes, it's a lesser known book than the others we've done so far.
Yeah, and I find it so fascinating that it's sort of a precursor to this this whole police procedural movement, and that he as an author is kind of credited with founding that genre, because that is a genre of story, and not just book, but also like TV show in our culture that we are so steeped in, I think, without even realizing it. I even think of something like Scooby-Doo that our kids liked, the recent Scooby-Doo movie, where it's this like mystery solving, and every episode is so predictable where you get the clues. I used to watch the show Castle that had Nathan Fillion in it, and he's a writer who, you know, tags along with this police department. And my husband was like, why do you like this? It's so formulaic. Every episode works the same way. It's the same every time. And I said, it's just comforting to me. I just like it. I just like, you know, Law and Order, SVU, and all these shows. So it's really interesting to see how this like developed in our way of thinking about stories.
Yeah, well, it's funny because a lot of these books, these old books, that's what we're doing on the show. First of all, we have to do books that are old because they're in the public domain, and that gives us permission to read them aloud. But also because these are the classics that people feel like they really are supposed to be reading, but which are often really hard to get into. They're hard to access. So we're reading these old books, and often they might seem to us to be sort of formulaic. Like you're saying, when we read Pride and Prejudice, a lot of people were like, this is just that I've seen this so many times. It's a rom-com, right? And it is a rom-com. It's just that it's the very first rom-com ever. And it's the same with this. You know, you're going to see things in this book that feel very familiar to you, that feel like those detective stories that you love to read, or those crime dramas that you love to watch. And it's all very familiar to us, but to them, it was all new. And I think that's really cool. It's cool to watch somebody creating a genre, which, as you say, has now become sort of ubiquitous. And it is comforting. And it's comforting because you kind of know, like, okay, these are the beats. These are the things that are going to happen, but how are they going to happen? How are they going to play out in this particular story? And this one, well, it's almost hard to talk about The Woman in White because anything that you say about it is going to give something away. It's that sort of story, but it's got, you know, it might feel like that formula, but it's got a lot of twists and turns.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And I don't want to give anything away, but I researched the book a little bit, you know, just reading about the story and its influence. And one of the things that I think is interesting that's been a theme in a lot of the novels that you've read, actually, is sort of the position of women in Victorian society. And it almost seems like the more I read from this era, the more it seems like everyone was obsessed with the place of women in society and the place of women in marriage and the power that women had or didn't have over their own lives. And it's interesting because we think of the Victorians as very stuffy, but their novels and their stories are so deeply invested and deeply emotional about this question almost.
Yes, absolutely. It's a huge theme. And Wilkie Collins in particular is huge about this. And he was a very big advocate of social reform around marriage. He believed that marriage was kind of a bum deal for women. He thought that people shouldn't get married because when you did, the woman had to kind of give over all of her control, essentially, and she had no control, and she could be controlled by the husband, and her money was then controlled by the husband, and there's a lot going on about that in his writing. But even more than that, it was a time when, you know, it was the very, very, very beginning of feminism, essentially. There were people starting to write, and even a sort of generation before, like when we were reading Pride and Prejudice, that's a generation before. But even then, there were people writing, like Mary Wollstonecraft is the most famous one, but there were people writing at the time talking about women's rights, essentially. And should women be allowed to vote? Should they be allowed to work? Should they have equal share of property? And it was a really big question. And they were living under the rule of a female monarch for the first time in a really long time. And Queen Victoria was this kind of huge personage who really shaped the era and the time. And she reigned for such a long time, and so many changes and so many things happened under her reign that it is a theme in a lot of these books. And it's a good thing to pull out because it's interesting to take a look at what people are saying about it. But also it's interesting to think about the ways that modern kind of literary critics have taken that idea and tried to kind of morph it and manipulate it into a more modern version of feminism. And I think that's something that I would like to try to undo for people, because I think it kind of ruins these books in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and I think it's been a thing for people for a while. I think there was an adaptation of Jane Eyre that was sort of written from the perspective of the wife in the attic who'd been locked away.
That's right. Wide Sargasso Sea by
Yes.
Jean Rhys, I think.
Right. So, I mean, modern people have come back to these stories and looked at them a different way from our modern lens. But like you say, it's almost more interesting to listen to people from the past about how, you know, they would have seen these issues in their society at the time, because we know how we see it now and we know how we would write about it now. But, you know, we don't have the past is a foreign country. I know that's like a cliche that people say, but people really were so different and they thought so differently. And that's one of the things I love about your podcast is that you're reading things in the original language that they were written in, not that it's a foreign language, but with all the original words, and it's not an adaptation, it's not dumbed down, and you pick apart the pieces when it gets a little tricky for us to understand as modern readers. But there was this whole debate on Twitter recently. I don't know if you saw people talking about this, but there was sort of an argument about translations of the Odyssey. And then some people started to say, well, we should really just read everything in translation. We should read Shakespeare in translation. We should have ChatGPT spit out a modern English version of all these books, and then young people can access them. They'll do so much more reading, and it's really just the story anyway. And I think something's lost, but I think a lot of people find it hard to pinpoint what it is.
It's funny because that was actually the first idea that I had when I was starting to think about starting this podcast. I was thinking about how can I make these books accessible to people, because they really are hard. And the thing that I noticed was that the people that are talking about these books, you know, people who teach them in college classrooms, or, you know, the academics who talk about them, because they do understand them so well and because they spend so much time thinking about them, there was this sense that I felt like was missing, which was that for some people, myself included, a lot of the time, for some people, when you open up these books and you read, you literally can't follow them. The language is too hard. And so I thought, well, how can I help people to understand the language? And the first thing I thought was, well, could I translate them? You know, could I think about them as if they were a foreign language, as if they were text in a foreign language, and translate them into modern English? And very quickly, I realized that that was probably the worst idea I'd ever had in my entire life. because what is lost is the world that the book exists in. What you lose when you take these books out of the language that they're written in and place them into a much more modern lingo is you lose the sense of the time and the place that is integral in a lot of ways to the story. You can't pull them out. You can adapt them, right? You can make a modern kind of retelling of the story where it takes place in the modern day and everybody is a modern person and they dress in modern clothes and they have modern problems and they go to work and all of those things. You can do that. But you can't tell the same story where they're still in Victorian England, they're still at the, in the lonely moors, in the country house, cut off from everyone else, but they're speaking in modern words. The story is gone. The ambiance is gone. The world, I always say like a book is a world that you get to visit and walk around in for a while and meet these people. And if you take it out of that language, then you take it out of that world. And something really important is lost. And that's why I felt like, well, no, okay, I can't do that. What I need to do is translate the things that need to be translated as I go along, as I read the real words that are there on the page. I need to just give people some handholds to some things to hold on to as they go so they can have the language, but also understand what it would mean in modern English. Yeah. And it's funny, I saw the thing about the Odyssey, but I didn't see that later part about translating things because I think, yeah, it's an understandable impulse. It's the impulse that I had at first, but I really think it's the wrong way to go.
Right. And I think, even something like Shakespeare, it's one of those English class cliches that when the English teacher says like, well, actually Shakespeare's written in modern English. And because young people tend to think of that as old English because there's all these and thous and wherefores and all the things that they think of as old English. So being told it's actually written in modern English and it's the same language as yours and you should be able to read this. And I think most kids in English class read it in the side-by-side, the folio editions with the explanations on the one side. But that's what I think of your podcast as being like, is like that. It's like the companion piece that makes it accessible because kids do read Shakespeare. They're able to do it and they do get a lot out of it. And I think that Shakespeare in particular, because he was so influential on the development of modern English and so much of our language has roots in Shakespeare, you almost have to keep the language. And I mean, Shakespeare is obviously very original, but many of his stories were lifted from Greek myth or from older stories and other places. And so I think sometimes when people go like, oh, well, Shakespeare, it's really just about the plot and the character, and it's really not. It really is the language too.
Absolutely. The whole thing is about the language. I mean, what writer wants someone to take their words and turn it into something else? I mean, we put the words on the page, those specific words for a reason. And those are the only building blocks you have when you're a writer. And so the words that you choose are incredibly important and they build the world and they build the characters and the way that they interact with each other. I think that a lot of times when people have that problem, they open the book and they're like, I don't understand this at all. Or like you're saying, you look at Shakespeare and there's all these strange words and they're all kind of put together in these very complicated ways. I think that people feel like, oh, well, then this just isn't for me. I just don't understand this, or I'm stupid. And what happens a lot of times, every time I post somewhere or I say somewhere, such and such a book is tricky. That language is tricky, but it's really good. At least one person writes in and says, no, it's not. It's not tricky.
Of course.
And that's the way that people are treated when they say that they don't understand a book, that this language is too difficult or whatever. And they think like, oh, well, then I must be an idiot. I must be really stupid. And if you want me to understand this, then you're going to have to put it into language that I can't understand because I'm a dope and you just told me so, and I can't read this, right? But in reality, it is hard. It is tricky. especially if you have no information about like historical context or what's going on. I mean, Shakespeare is full of like references to what's going on at the time or relationships between various historical figures and things. And if you don't know those things, or if you don't know what the deal is with Victorian England or, Regency life with all the balls and the tea parties and things like that, if you don't know any of that, then of course you can't read this. It's not that you're stupid. It's just that you don't have the information that you need. You don't have the tools at your disposal that you need. And so I think it's easy to say like, oh yeah, well, it's just old language and I don't understand this old language. Who would? So let's turn it into modern language. But really, should we erase the past? Should we erase history? Like, no, we should learn. We should learn to understand it. And in order to learn to understand it, we have to admit that we don't. And I think that's okay. I think you should admit that you don't. And I think then you should seek out some way to figure it out.
And I'm so glad because a lot of these books aren't taught in school, or at least aren't taught anymore in school. Yeah. I think Pride and Prejudice is the only one you've done so far that I actually read as a school book in an English class. And, I think that these challenges do come across as too intimidating to teachers in this day and age, where they say like, I can't get the kids to be interested in this. I can't get them to read this. They don't like it. They don't understand it. We need to read modern books that are accessible to their experiences, or we just need to, we need to read adapted versions that have essentially a Cliff Notes version of the book. And then I think like, oh, the kids must be so bored in English class. They never read anything good. And I think you saw, we had our daughter this year in English class first read All Quiet on the Western Front, which I think is the first, what I would consider like real novel that they've read in school. Yeah. And they're doing a Midsummer Night's Dream later in the year, too. And the school sent home a whole big apology, like, this has a lot of graphic imagery. This book is about war. We're skipping certain passages. Don't see the movie. It's way too scary. Like, on and on. And I'm like, imagine if you're a kid and, like, they never read you anything for fear of how scary or dangerous it's going to be. I mean, like, do they know what kids watch on TV or in the movie theater now?
Yeah, exactly. First of all, your dramatic reading of that letter was one of my favorite things that I've seen in a while. That was fantastic. But right. I mean, first of all, why choose that book if you're so afraid that it's going to harm the children? Pick something else. There is an enormous variety of wonderful classic literature out there, or pick this book because there's nothing wrong with teaching it to children. But I think that we have a mentality right now in our culture that these books, when a book becomes a classic for whatever reason, when it's placed into the bucket of classic literature, then it becomes something that must be dissected. It must be taken apart and analyzed, and we have to find all the hidden meanings and all the symbolism and what does this mean and what does that mean. And we have forgotten that these stories are just stories. And the point of them is a story. In the same way as the novel that you pick up in order to, entertain yourself on the airplane or whatever it is, that is a story that sweeps you away. These books are also stories that sweep us away, which is why they are classics. They have stood the test of time because they have some kind of universal appeal. And the appeal is not whatever little detail you picked up and its significance to whatever other thing you think it's significance to. Its appeal is the story that it holds within it. And I think when you get into that kind of English teacher mentality, and then you start thinking about, well, how am I going to get these kids to understand the significance of the Red Room in Jane Eyre? Or, how am I going to get these kids to understand, the significance of birds or whatever? When you start thinking about that, then it's like, yeah, we might as well read something we pulled off the young adult shelf at Barnes and Noble. When you start thinking about them as, well, this is a love story. This is a love story between a dark, brooding man and this poor plain governess. Like, what 14-year-old doesn't want to read that?
Right.
And I think that's what we've lost sight of. And that's why we're sort of picking and choosing these kind of weird selections, trying to find something that can grab these kids. We're not doing them the service of saying, this is a great story. This is Pride and Prejudice. It's really funny. It's really, really funny. You're going to laugh out loud. And it's a rom-com in the same way that, your rom-com, that Mean Girls or whatever it is that you watch, on TV or on the movies. It's a rom-com. Let's read it like that. Because who wouldn't want to read a rom-com that's laugh out loud funny?
Right. And it's such a great point because we think, sometimes we know better than everyone who came before us, that they liked this book, like, oh, my kid won't read that. I'm just going to get them a graphic novel of whatever the latest story is off the shelf, or something that's adapted from a movie that my kid liked to watch, or whatever it is. And like you say, the classics are classics for a reason. And it's not because, there was a bunch of analysis that people could do on them at the time. It was because people really liked them.
Yes, that's right. And I also think, and this is, I think, one of my more unpopular opinions, but I also think that we give books to kids too early. I think that I don't know why we give these really weighty books. I mean, some books should be given to kids at the right time. But I don't know why we give these really weighty books about really adult concerns, like really adult things, to little kids, like 12, 13-year-old kids. I think we should wait. I think we should wait because the reason we give them to them is because maybe we can teach them to analyze them. But I want them to enjoy them. I want them to love them. And I say this as someone who was given a lot of books too early and had to go back. Because what happens is you read them, you don't understand them. You can't really identify with the characters because you're 12 and these characters are having really grown-up concerns, right? And then you think, well, I hate that book. I hate Jane Eyre. I hate Pride and Prejudice. And so you run the risk of never picking it up again. Because you remember that you hate it. You might not remember why, but you remember that you hate it. And now that has been done to you forever. And you're going to have to come back and make an effort to read it again if you want to. And so I think that there are books that are classics that kids should read. I think once you get into high school, you can read some of these books. I mean, I fell in love with Jane Eyre when I was 14 or so. So it's not like, it's not like we need to wait until we're 30 or something like that. But I do think, Roald Dahl is a classic. He's a classic writer. I think we can give him to kids.
Even L. Frank Baum too. I
think. The Narnia books, right? There are all of these books that are classics and filled with all kinds of beautiful themes and imagery and things to talk about, really juicy things to dive into in an English class and talk about, that aren't these kind of really inaccessible to children books. And I think that's part of the problem too, is that we're asking children to read books for adults because we've forgotten that these books are just stories. We wouldn't hand a 10-year-old Stephen King,
right.
We would know that wasn't right. And, or we wouldn't hand them, I mean, whatever books are out there in the world right now that people are reading, the most popular books, we wouldn't hand them to children if they're not children's books. And so I think that's part of the problem too, is people are like, well, I don't get this and it's boring and I hate it. And now I'm never going to pick it up again because they weren't ready for it.
And I think there is really a dearth of, modern children's books that are really written for children and not through an adult lens. So many of them feel the need to pack in these issues about, parents getting divorced or dying or, all kinds of crazy things that they need to force into these stories that could just be children's story. I mean, there's some really talented writers out there. And I think the second children become old enough that the school perceives they're ready to move beyond Harry Potter, they want to fit books with adult issues in for kids. And I think that's something that maybe more classic children's writers were a little more free of this presumption that, they had to force adult issues or themes, things your guidance counselor would want to talk about into a book that's for kids to just read.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think another thing that's occurring to me as you're talking is that something that you also need, like we were just talking about a few minutes ago, is the historical context that a lot of these books, you need them, right? They take place in the Victorian era, or they take place during the Civil War, or during World War I, or whatever it is, you need that. And a lot of the classic children's books that we might pick up also take place in those time periods or in that world. And it could help you to have some of the background information that you would need when you get there. I mean, I'm thinking about, like The Secret Garden or A Little Princess, for example,
Right.
are books that could introduce you to kind of Victorian England at a time that then when you go on to read Jane Eyre or The Woman in White or whatever, that could help you, or books that are written in wartime, or books that, for example, like World War II. I know we were talking about World War I, but World War II, the Narnia books take place during World War II, and you could get that information out of them and take that with you to other books later on. And so I think we're skipping that step a lot of the time. And then we're asking these kids to enter these worlds with adult concerns at in a time period they know nothing about, in a place they know nothing about. And it's kind of like, yeah, of course they don't like them. And of course they want something to grab onto, some modern lens to look at the thing through, because they have no footholds.
Right. We put this stuff forward to them and it's very mysterious. And
Yeah.
I've been so excited to share this podcast with my daughter because it makes these books accessible to her in a way that's very tough, and is very tough coming from English classes where they read everything in adaptation or everything that was written in the last 20 years or so, that I can't just hand her Jane Eyre. Like, I was the type of kid that I would sit there and read Jane Eyre because I was weird. And like, there's pictures of me like at recess in middle school reading, and my kids are like, why were you reading
Well, we would
during
have been
recess?
friends.
What
That's
was
nice.
wrong with you? But she's not the type of person that I can just hand her Jane Eyre and she's off to the races and can go. But it's great to have that because it is such a great story and there's so much to connect with, even from a modern audience, as a teenager, that you can relate to and see yourself in and think about. And, you lose something if you have no way to access these works. So I'm very excited to keep getting into The Woman in White with you, Faith. And I'm excited to see where the story takes me. I've tried not to spoil it too much. I've looked a little bit online, but I'm trying to be kind of good.
Yeah, you have to be good. People keep writing me and say, I can't do it. I have to read ahead. I'm like, no, stay with it, because it's so fun to let it unfold as it goes along. There's so many twists and turns. It's great.
So I encourage everyone else who's interested in classic literature like I am, and who wants a break from politics and modern times and all that entails, to check out Storytime for Grownups with Faith Moore. She's a great reader aloud of books, and we love having her on the show anytime. Obviously, you're welcome back, and hopefully we will talk to you again soon when you make your next selection too. So thank you so much, Faith.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to come on here. Thank you so much.
That is Faith Moore of the Storytime for Grownups podcast. We love Faith. She's great. She's very popular in the chat right now with on Rumble. And yes, and that's part of Alice. So Alice is definitely the literary geek. And I've read a little bit. The only time I ever read is when we're interviewing one of the Clavens, which is like Faith Moore's dad is Andrew Klavan, and his son as well. And I just read for those interviews. But let's see Tom New Hampshire says something that I want. Particularly regarding gender roles and class structures, even when seemingly critiquing them, making it less progressive other than... See there? There you go. I'm glad that you guys managed to ask her. Splash says, hey, when Alice gets back, to it's back. Can you ask her if she feels that much of VCOR? I don't know what VCOR is, and character portrayals in Victorian literature are actually quite conservative, often reinforcing societal norms of the time. Oh, this Alice is going to like this this question. Yeah, no, you're right, Phil. Yeah, this is the kind of thing that Alice, and we went to a marriage counselor, and the marriage counselor said, when Alice wants to talk about literature, Tom, you need to share with her as well. So just listen to it. And here's the thing is that I haven't read anything. And like I read Super Fudge and Where the Sidewalk Ends, and at some point I think The Great Gatsby. I think maybe this is all like more than 30 years ago. So I'm not I try to tell our marriage counselor I don't have anything to say, and that's why I usually pass Alice to her sister or suggest. Apparently, at one time I was just giving her sister's phone number when Alice would start talking to me about Madame Bovary and the societal ramifications of it. Like, I couldn't keep up, so I would just start saying her sister's phone number. I don't remember even doing this, but the kids all like still do it. So Alice would say, anyway, if you look at Madame Bovary and the symbolism of the old lamp being there, and I would just start to say 339 and whatever, which I guess is rude, but that was her sister's number, so she could call because they're all readers. They can talk to each other. But no, apparently you're supposed to, as a husband, you're supposed to talk about this stuff still, even though I don't know anything about it, haven't read anything about it at all. Getting back to be a man, walk out of marriage counseling. I know. Yeah. No, the marriage counseling actually was kind of good in the sense that they were kind of real and vicious. They did use vernacular like my truth, and I was like, hey, I don't want to do this. I don't want to talk about my truth and this and that. But all counseling is kind of just, I think, a kind of way to shake things up, and so you're panning for gold, and you see if you find anything. So it's good. It was good for us. Certainly, there's no doubt about that. Let's see. Want to get back to some of this political stuff with I've always known that Newsom was a dirtbag, but he has been on display, and it's like he is really an elite dirtbag guy. He is really one of the elites. And he's been bouncing all around when he speaks and like dancing, and he's trying to make the most out of this. I think he's seeing the way people felt about Cuomo. Remember all the Cuomo-sexuals when Andrew Cuomo was telling people during COVID, making women feel comfortable and saying, we're going to have to go with the authorities on this and trust our healthcare professionals. But we do know that masking is an important part of this whole thing. If he was from Boston, maybe he'd sound like that. But this whole droning thing where he was acting like a husband, and everybody said, "Oh, wow." Julie's don't take advice from some lady who's been thrice divorced. Who's that? Oh, no, a marriage counselor? I don't think she has been. You might be right though. Don't take advice. Julie, talk about what Alice is good at. Roof, ceiling, toilet repairs. Yeah, well, I'm in trouble again because she thinks I've been breaking the toilet. Both toilets are off base. We need somebody like really to come. Did I quit after 3 visits to marriage counseling? Is that something I said, Tommy? Oh, because I think that you may have. If you're talking about me, then or me and Alice. When me and Alice. No, the first thing we did when 2 years ago, when everything was hitting the fan, which was the worst year of my life, it was like total hellacious. First we got BetterHelp because there were no shrinks available. So around here anyway, because COVID had sucked up all those shrinks. And so that was a good way to initially put out the fire. And then we did, let's see. Okay. Looked up Faith Moore. No, that is not true. She's lovely. But she calls, definitely. Get it? I don't get that. Feel free to share without her. Yeah, no. Let me get to the Newsom stuff because this guy is just like unbelievable. Talk about a sociopath, American psycho. He's moving around into these interviews and like bobbing and weaving.
We're dealing with a myriad of issues. I was just talking to Josh Green, the governor down in Hawaii, who had some ideas around some land use concerns he has around speculators coming in, buying up properties and the like. So we're already working with our legal teams to move those things forward, and we'll be presenting those in a matter of days, not just weeks. We're dealing with a myriad of issues.
It's amazing. Meanwhile, if you get over on the View, they're unable to. Oh no, let me make. Okay, we'll do the View. This is. I mean, talk about. You just heard Alice and Faith Moore have a very intelligent, deep conversation about literature.
Because he says it was unbelievable. I thought it was fake news. He said that California's woke politics and DEI are the reasons for the fires because Newsom has been tearing down dams because Native Americans, but he called them Indians, wanted some of the river back so they could catch salmon. And Gavin didn't just knock down one dam for the Indians, he knocked them all down. He knocked down 4 of the dams. I'm sorry, this is stolen land, first of all, okay? California is stolen
fantastic.
land. Second of all, that's part of what always happens. These dams, there's preservation of the dam. So that was just complete, not only misinformation, but it was racist. And I think we need to also call stuff like that out.
Well, look, I think what this has shown us is for people who thought that Donald Trump has changed, he has not changed, okay? No. He is the same immature, insensitive, inappropriate oaf that he's always been. What he should be doing right now is putting out tweets saying, I thank the heroic first responders. I thank the countries of Canada and Mexico and all the others who've helped. I thank the surrounding states that have sent help. I have talked to Governor Newsom. I have talked to Mayor Bass.
That's not what he does. That's not what he needs to do either. And no, he is right about that. They did the dumb stuff with this smelt. They did the other stuff. But people can't stand Trump. They can't deal with him whatsoever, which is why this is so great. Jonathan Capehart today. Jonathan Capehart is talking to PBS. He's on there with, what's his name, Brooks. But it's the Capehart answering the question. You're going to get inside the emotional... Hi.
Something in the oven is ready.
Oh, yeah, it's been ready. It's just been warming. You can have some of that.
Okay.
It's chicken. It's delicious. It's teriyaki chicken.
Okay.
Anson can't have it.
Okay.
You know what I mean? It's awesome. You're going to love it. Here we go.
Donald Trump is vowing to appeal this conviction. We'll see what comes of that. But after, being convicted of 34 felonies, there are people who look at this case and they say that, Donald Trump walks away with a punishment that is less than what one would receive for a speeding ticket.
Look, this case, this hush money case, was the case that everybody said was the crappy case. Of the 4, remember, Donald Trump was indicted 4 times, and this one was the least important, the shakiest, and yet it's the one case where Donald Trump was held accountable. The one case where he was brought to trial before a jury of his peers in his hometown of New York City and was found guilty 34 times. I think that is great punishment. What's also great punishment is the sentencing today, where the judge said, you're going to be president, you're not going to go to jail, but you're a convicted felon. And so for the rest of his life, any story written about him will have to mention the fact that he is a convicted felon. If not on the first reference, definitely by the second reference. And that is fitting, that is right, that is just.
It's not, Capehart. The fact that this is what you're concentrated on is that you need this kind of validation is very, very telling. It's not fitting. It doesn't mean anything. Nobody thinks that he's been convicted of any felony. Paying his lawyer for hush money to keep some woman quiet, it's absolutely what you do. What do you think the etiquette is if you're a big-time real estate guy in New York? What do you think they're doing? There's no crime, there's no nothing to it, but these people, they just want to have that. Also, there's another thing. Like, with Donald Trump, there's no way that you ever, some of the left media, like this guy will, and some left media will add in there just to personally screw it to him, stick it to him that he's a convicted felon. But with Donald Trump, he is so many more nouns than convicted felon. He's a twice president. He's a assassination surviving president. He is a guy who almost ended up in jail and has instead ascended to be president once again. He is the most. This is the tenacious, the biggest single political comeback in the history of our politics ever. Is Donald Trump. So if you're going to say, no, you better put in convicted felon, nobody cares about that. That's not one of the things that he does. You know, billionaire businessman, there's the thing that he does. He's there, you know? Convicted felon, who gives a frig? Nobody believes that there's anything to that. I think a lot of us aren't like huge through and through Trump guys, but you guys are playing these stupid games. The guy you're hearing is Jonathan Capehart, who does this PBS show, and he considers himself quite a thinker, but he is just this like dandy guy who's lightweight. You know, there's a certain class of Washington Beltway columnists that they really think that they're on an elevated plane when it comes to being intellectual, and he's not. This guy's dumb.
Do I wish the other 3 cases had gone to trial and that he had faced accountability on those? Yes, but this will do.
This will do. That's all that matters. He wants to hear it. You see, the man hurt my feelings. I want to hear that he says convicted felon. The guy is bigger than anything at this point. Than anything. And this idea that we're going to make sure you accentuate the convicted felon. Nobody cares. Literally nobody cares. By the way, I've gotten a notification here that Alice Shattuck is in the driveway. In the driveway. So I hope that you all, I wonder if she'll get mad at you. We'll say it's possible. It's possible, though she hasn't had a cold bear or anything, so maybe it's possible that she won't be. But yeah, now Trump's above it all. Now he's above it all. I mean, the guy is such a legend now. We've transcended anything else. I mean, by trying to destroy him, they made him just much bigger than he could ever be. Ever be. And it is like, this guy is the biggest celebrity in the world now. People think he's legendary. That he's almost a godlike character in the sense that he survived everything. Everything they threw at him. Absolutely nuts. But he's gotten through it. It's amazing. Let me see what we get for chats. What else comes back in here? Here we go. All right. I hope you're ready. You ready? Okay. Well, I'll wait for Alice. I think it should be just a moment here. She comes up here. I mean, maybe I'll play one. We'll play one. I think there's a Steve from Gloucester one there. Where's Phil? Oh, Phil, you're right there. So we'll play. Oh, here we go. Alice K. Shattuck Esquire is making her way here. Albie. No, that's Sally. Okay, wrong one. Okay, it says bro really. Is this what we're going to be hit with? Is this the one? This is probably about this.
So after hearing a little bit of your radio show, yes, I understand the reason why there was no Burn Barrel podcast.
Yes.
So, Tom, if you won the lottery tomorrow, you would sabotage yourself to being completely broke.
Yes.
And, of course, Alice would be on her own with the kids and very rich.
Yes.
Simply because you can't help yourself.
Yes.
Bro, really?
I know. Yes, I understand. I was pressured and cajoled and pushed. Alice, very good feedback on Faith. You're the bro's lover.
Yeah.
It's been absolutely. It was consistent. So yes, I got a bro really message because of what happened this weekend, which was not of my own doing, by the way, whatsoever, at all. Alice?
Sorry, I was trying to look.
Don't look. They just take my word for it.
Okay.
Take my word for it. It's all. Okay, ready?
I'm ready.
Why are you so giddy and pretty?
I don't know.
I'm sorry I squeezed you.
Pinched me?
Pinched you, yes. Don't pinch Alice.
It's rude when people are sleeping and they've asked you specifically to let them sleep because they really need their rest.
I don't like that.
Stop.
One would assume that firemen across the United States have the same responsibility of checking fire hydrants throughout the year to make sure that the water is flowing properly. I know in Gloucester, once a year, firemen come onto my street, they open up the hydrant, they make sure the water's running fine. Any maintenance that they need to do, they'll get done while they're there. And I would assume that probably happened in the Palisades area where the firemen checked those hydrants. And I would imagine they were well aware for months, if not years, that there was a issue with water not coming out of the hydrants. And as good and responsible firemen, they probably reported it to their supervisors or the administrators, just like any worker would do if they needed something from their boss to get their job done. They would report that. So I'm wondering where the incompetence lies in the administrative or supervisors. Like, who dropped the ball on that? Because there's no way that the firemen didn't know that there wasn't water coming out of those hydrants that day. They had to have known this for months, if not years. And I bet you they're frustrated more than anybody that they didn't have water that day. I mean, it's just like playing basketball without the basketball. Like, you need water to put out fires. This is comical.
Yeah, no, Steve, I agree. I agree. Somebody, at least in some parts of LA, knew that there would be a problem. There's no doubt. The way this unfolded was just odd. And to be like, for them to say, the apparatus is meant to fight one or two house fires, not the entire city. Well, the entire city is on fire.
Right.
So, and I'm surprised actually, like, where is everybody from every other place? There are like water trucks. You saw Zelensky's offering to help now? He knows where his bread is buttered. So, there you go. Let's see. Ready? Mm-hmm. Phil from Attleboro.
Hey, everyone.
Hey, Phil.
Getting pretty pumped about the watch party.
Yep.
Week from tomorrow. We got, looks like right now, 85 folks. That should be a good crowd. Should have a lot of fun.
Yes.
Just a reminder to bring cash. The bar is cash only. Okay?
Is that true, Phil?
That's what Phil says, yes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It says cash bar on the invite.
No, it says cash bar. I didn't know it was cash only.
Okay.
Oh.
No cards, no debit, no credit.
Darn, that's good to know. I wouldn't have
I bet you they have an ATM on premises or nearby if they take only cash at the bar.
Yeah. I didn't see. Yeah, I thought for cash bar just meant it was an open bar. I thought something. But that's good to know, Phil. Thank you.
Cash only. And we're pretty much all set. And I also want to thank Tommy in New Hampshire and John Locke for all their help. We have a couple more. Looks like one more expense to come up, and I noticed Tom and Alice have forwarded me a spreadsheet. Shows some folks willing to kick in, so we will be after you folks to donate some money for the last of the expenses. It shouldn't be a whole lot, but we'll keep you posted. I have email addresses, and I'll contact you and where to Venmo that money to cover the last of our costs. Okay, so looking forward to meeting everyone. Should be a great time, and we'll see you a week from tomorrow.
Here we go.
Minute 6.
Thank you. It was minute 6. Thank you so much for these things. Yes, Phil was doing that, Alice. I was out being bullied and pressured into hitting the town.
For you.
With these bottom feeder people you call my friends.
3 inches. Oh, you're way off. And I'll tell you this about Steve from Merrimack. You know what they say. He's the inspiration for twin beds. Hey, I'll see you later. And I'm sure you'll talk about me while I'm gone.
I'm all for the Rodney impression. I think that was spot on. Nailed it. Perfect. Fantastic.
I hope you guys weren't caught up in that Palisades fire. I know it's been a few days since we've heard from you, so
yeah,
just hoping everything's okay over there.
Well, Alice scrubbed the mission yesterday.
Maryland.
Yep.
You know, when I lived in L.A. in the mid to late 90s, I drove up PCH once and checked out Pacific Palisades, but I mean, mainly just drove by like Pepperdine University up that way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's just so beautiful, that part, you know, with Malibu, etc.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's unimaginable the beauty of the place, and it's a shame that this happened.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Isn't that like what big lesson takeaway is for like these blue governors and legislatures and et cetera? They happen to rule over blue states, and for some reason the voters like give them credit for making the state beautiful or something. It's like,
they didn't invent the Pacific Ocean, you guys, and the mountains and all the other cool things that are there.
I know.
They didn't invent the oil that's under the ground and all the stuff that's happening.
Right, or the reservoirs that were meant to be free and full.
Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for leaving chat messages. Looking forward to seeing everybody at the party. Cash bar, cash only bar. Bring cash. Use cash. Anyway, looking forward to seeing everyone 1 week from today. Very exciting. If you want to join us for a little extra content each week and for the live streams, you can do that at patreon.com/burnbarrel.
C'est la vie.